Hello and welcome. I'm John McCarthy, Senior Reporter at The Drum, and today I'm joined by Google's Nishma Robb, Chair of the Drum Awards for Marketing, to briefly touch upon all of the hot points our industry should be aware of this year. It's great to meet you, Nishma.
Lovely to meet you too. And thank you so much for the invitation to be involved in the awards. Really excited about it.
Thanks for keeping me company today. I've not seen anyone yet. Question. First question is, the pandemic's made it a year like no other for marketers. We've been hearing a lot of that, the new normal and all of that. And I've had a lot of fun covering that in this last year. But what's your assessment of how the industry has broadly responded to all the challenges facing them over the last year?
So look, it has been a year like no other. We all know that. We're bored of all the kind of different lines and way that we've described it. I have to say, I think the marketing industry has been demonstrating incredible resilience and ability to, flex and adjust and keep going. It's interesting to see that, rather than, and I think there was definitely a fear at the beginning with all this uncertainty, it would have been very easy for the industry almost kind of bit closing on itself and be hypercritical and slightly, I suppose defeatist, I think, in terms of what was a really challenging situation, both in terms of, all the uncertainty that we were all facing, but actually perhaps some of the amplification of the other challenges that the industry is already facing, whether it's around how we think about how we use the different ways to communicate or the causes or purpose or, storytelling, etc. Craft. So I actually think I'm very proud to be part of an industry that I think has shown such phenomenal resilience and optimism and growth throughout it. I've seen a real sense of progress, which, in a time when we're all feeling so incredibly stuck in every aspect of our life, literally indoors and beyond, that sense of, I suppose, kind of solidarity and support for each other and an effort to think about, actually, we've got a bit of time forced upon us, possibly, and at times no time because we have to respond quickly. I think it's actually kind of brought the best of our industry out and forced issues and discussions to the front that have been a bit too easy to sidestep and ignore. So yeah, very proud, I think, of a phenomenal industry to be part of. And that has had such meaningful change. I have to say, if you look at marketing's role throughout this in terms of whether it's, the efficacy of the information that the government or others are trying to share, the efforts around, not just the public service broadcast type information, the announcements, but actually the way that we've engaged, entertained, communicated, shifted, adapted. I look at the role of kind of marketing comms has been so pivotal and crucial within the pandemic crisis that, I imagine there's a lot of people who feel very proud and can look back on their own small contribution to the last year.
And they should, and hopefully they'll get the accolades they deserve. I'm sure they will. It's something our audience is maybe a bit tired of hearing, is just how different everything has been this year. And one of the biggest changes for many was the shift to remote work. And I think that's something you would have seen a lot of at Google. And my question simply is, how do you ensure your teams are delivering really good work?
Without a doubt, the shift to working from home has been probably one of the things that we can all relate to and have kind of gone on this journey together. So irrespective of whether your working from home setup is, there's a lot of commonality of the frustration and loneliness that it's brought about. I think in terms of getting great work from the team, and that's been a real lesson of leadership. So, whether it's, steadying the ship and being in clarity has been critical. But I think the biggest shift, and for me, in terms of particularly in the creative process and the breadth of teams and people that we're working with, both within Google and our partners, it's that sense of belonging and connection. So when everything is this kind of diarised moment of like dive into a meeting, you're straight into agenda and off you go, and you've lost all of that soft touch that we would have and the conversation, and it's not small talk, it's actually sometimes the most important talk as part of a meeting. That for me, building time in and not making it like scheduled fun, and here's another Zoom bloody, quiz, which we all got very tired of. Actually, it was that time for belonging and connection that was the most important thing. And for me, it was giving space and opportunity to debate and discuss ideas, because actually in some respects, the environment of your Google Hangout or Meet or Zoom or whatever it is, your video call, and you're now this tiny little square on the screen, extrovert or introvert, that's a challenge. You could either be more recessive and quiet, or actually you could be even more dominant or feel like you can't be heard, and everyone's got a Wi-Fi problem or whatever it might be. So I actually think that sense of being heard, being seen, and being part of something has been one of the things that I've probably put at the heart of the way that I've been thinking about communicating with the team. We have a lovely meeting every Friday, my team meeting, which we've religiously kept to, which I've loved, Friday mornings. And it's like there's no agenda, there's no slides. I just have a conversation with them and we have a lot of fun. I through lockdown made it a sequins and slippers day for myself because I just needed to get a bit more dolled up one day of the week. But just having that time to connect and share a bit more of the why. You know, I think from a leadership point of view and from a creative point of view is not spend, you know, when you're just rushing and rushing to get stuff done, not spending enough in terms of sharing challenge, opportunity, why, a bit more of the thinking that happens that sometimes you'd pick up in a physical environment, but you don't anymore because you're just relegated to the few people you're going to meet through the video calls in a day. That sense of belonging is and understanding is like so important. And I think it's been critical to the creative process. And just huge amounts of sense of humour, because how many times I sat in creative meetings where we had to change again, or the rules are changed around what masks you could wear and what you couldn't and the rest of it. And you had to keep a sense of humour throughout that, because the amount of change that you had to go through in that period of time was significant. You just couldn't predict moment to moment what was going to happen.
As they say, if you don't laugh, you will cry.
Yeah.
I think you really hit the nail on the head there, especially in such a creative industry. Idea generation and growing with your team, you know, it's all very, very important. At the other end of that process, we've seen a shift in consumer behaviour. Now, you'll be aware of all of them, I'm sure. But how has that affected your sort of mindset at Google? How have you changed how you reach people, or why you reach people, perhaps?
I think that, so yeah, look, the shift is we're all very familiar with, and it's very evident as to what that shift is. You know, we can relate to it very clearly in our own lives. This isn't one of those moments where you look at a set of data and go, is that really what people are doing? You know, you're seeing it live out in front of your eyes. I think the thing for me that I'm most encouraged and challenged by is twofold. So one is around so much of kind of planning, particularly media planning and thought about reaching people is still very siloed and still very simplistic in terms of, you know, reach comes here and then it's here and here. And do we really think about the entire makeup of actually all the signals that an individual takes during the course of the day and how memory is built up, or connection with a brand, or even recognizing actually the different, you know, it's almost too simplistic to just say it's video or content. Actually, it's the environment, my context, my mental state of when I'm receiving it. So I might be watching video, but, you know, if it's purely entertainment and leisure versus something I'm much more leaned in and engaged on and sharing, you know, that requires a lot more thought than the simplicity of just eyeballs and mass reach and actually kind of being around popular moments. I think the texture of the way and the intricacies of the way that we are receiving content has been, you know, particularly important to think about. You know, without a doubt, the challenge of not being able to use channels that help build up that picture, you know, so the idea that people are locked at home a bit more, are stuck to the small vicinity of their area, if that's, you know, where they're restricted in terms of lockdown, you know, and our usual behaviours, it did require some extra thought around, well, actually, what are we replacing the behaviours? The reality is everything gets replaced. You know, so if I missed my morning commute, I was filling it with something else. I was still absorbing information. And I think that's where it needed a different approach. I think the other thing that's been really interesting is the, you know, so cut through in terms of messages in that environment has been critical. So again, that kind of contextual positioning of how you're reaching people, but what actually cuts through. So, you know, I think it's fair to say, you know, at the start of the pandemic, there was a lot of work that felt very similar. Of course, like we all rushed to UGC because that's the only way we could produce things. There was an incredible amount of, do you reflect tone, the somber nature of what was happening? So I could see what was happening in my world outside. It was reflected back to me on the screens or the content I was absorbing. Or it was the ones who quickly realised, going, actually, do you know what? That's not the research and insight. You know, so much of our time is reflective. Actually, people didn't want to reflect reality; they needed escapism, and that's a real challenge for marketeers. Because when do you need to be respectfully, tonally reflective? When do you need to be a fantasist and escape and bring humour and lightness? And that's a huge challenge for every marketeer here. And some have done it brilliantly, some less so, and I think, you know, that will be, I hope, is an incredible lesson that we take forward to, because it really demonstrates that critical point of listening and insight and the immediacy of being able to do that. You can't wait for 6 months reports. You're out of date, now, a few weeks and you're out of date. So finding sources that allow you to be a little bit more connected to the reality of people's current existence. When you see that in people's work, that really clear insight and a connection, that's been the most magical work for me in the last year.
I'm really glad you brought that up as well, and that's a trend we hope continues. Maybe marketers have reconnected with the people they're supposed to be talking with. Time will tell on that one. And now there's a lot of onus on the recovery in 2021. We do expect things will return to normal or pre-pandemic levels of ad spend at least by 2022-ish or the end of 21. How are you and your team preparing for the months ahead? What fail-safes and measures do you have in place?
So no one would predict what's going to happen next. I wouldn't even dare it. But I think the thing is about learning the lessons we've learned. Right? So agility and being able to kind of adapt your focus and your style of storytelling is the most important thing. We have very long lead times, as you know, in this industry. To make stuff, it takes time, and you can be out of date very quickly. So I think that clear insight and thought, constant markers, so you don't check in once, you're checking regularly on the relatability and suitability of work. So it's not checking once, it's checking throughout. And that sense of testing has to be so core to the kind of process. But I also think, look, I am an optimist. I'm a fantasist as well. I'm a big believer of things. We're sitting at the edge of something very exciting, and exciting in a sense of, look, we are faced with huge economic challenge. That's not going to go, and societal and political, and really, I think some kind of deep discussion and debate around, what is next. But within that, there's also this credible kind of pent up frustration of an opportunity of release and quite a joyous moment. I think, I've said to my team several times, it's my Studio 54 moment. But, whatever it is, it's the roaring 20s. For me, there's something really interesting and exciting about that, particularly working in marketing, because that release of creativity and storytelling and thought and expression, it's we don't know what that future is. It's undefined. And that for me is the thing that gives me absolute tingles, because I think preparing yourself for that moment, all you could do is you can rest on your skills and your sense, but being ready for it is going to be one of the most exciting bits of the journey. I think, we've got some very interesting years ahead of us. Tough. I'm, totally aware of this is going to be one of the toughest periods we go. But I think if we're being really honest, we've been in a bit of a creative fog in the last few years. We've data and technology and its intersection and people and, overcomplication. I wonder if we've just lost a bit of the true up connecting back to culture and creativity. I feel really excited about this new release and a genuine democratization of it. The one thing that technology will bring is everyone has an opportunity to tell that story or show their work or share it or whatever it might be. And that's really exciting, because when you go, actually, if you put that in the hands of many, what are we going to see next? I mean, So I'm an optimist, planning for total expected uncertainty, but making sure that we are true to our values as individuals and the brand and the business, but ready to jump on the excitement. And look, who doesn't want a bit of fun in their lives?
Honestly, I got a bit of goosebumps during that. Maybe it's the fact I've been locked in the house for a year.
I've got goosebumps saying it.
There you go. Well, that's a sign of a good interview. I'm looking forward to the parties and the art and the changes in culture ahead. And that brings us to the next question. Maybe one of the biggest changes of culture we saw last year was the sort of surge of the Black Lives Matters movement. Obviously, this is bigger than marketing, but it had a vital role in changing how we do business. What sort of trends, maybe that's the biggest trend still, and I hope it is, but what sort of trends in that sort of sphere do you think brands and marketers will be thinking of most this year?
So I think the Black Lives Matter movement and just a general awakening of consciousness is, will undoubtedly be the greatest benefit of coming out of this pandemic. I think, people's awakening and attention. I mean, it took the world to stand still to notice, which is frustrating. But look, this is an amazing opportunity to lean into. And I think, for me, I think the most important thing is, as a brand, it's a lesson about not just paying attention. and respect, and respectfully, it's a requirement. In my opinion, you shouldn't have the right to operate if you cannot be respectful and put equality at the heart of your work. And for me, the breadth has to be equality. It's got to be, what does that actually mean? And not to get into niches and marginalization, but actually go, the pandemic has had winners and losers without a doubt, but the best thing that can come out of it is a committed sense from everyone about what equality should look like and mean, and how do we make that possible for everyone. I actually think, that sense of bias and prejudice that exists in our society isn't just the obvious. I think we're now seeing greater layers of it. As we've talked about work that we've done with Black-owned and ethnically owned businesses and to create more fairer economic opportunity. I've also, you can see, and there's been lots of criticism about the communications around the pandemic to different minority groups who feel they haven't been included at all in conversation. We have conversations a lot about when the pubs are opening and when Christmas is happening, but actually if you're of a minority that celebrates and puts importance elsewhere, you're not being talked to. The danger is at the heart of marketing, that means your marketing is not effective, because if your purpose was to make sure every single person is aware, abides by the rules, gets a vaccine, whatever it might be, but actually we're alienating 30% of your audience, well, that's not very good marketing. We all have lessons to learn from this, to say, and it's easy to criticize. So I say that with light touch, to know that this is work in progress for all of us. But I hope going forward, people stop thinking about this as causes and actually start to see this is what makes great, brilliant marketing. It's just you need to connect with real people. And I start with saying, do you know who is the UK? How many of them are actually included in your targets and who you want to reach? And do you really understand how they feel and think today, and therefore how you're communicating them, both creatively, how you reach them, what matters to them? I feel like there's still been, we still have a very enforced approach to what should be celebrated, considered and communicated. Mm-hmm. That's not Britain. Britain is this incredible, wonderful melting pot of people, not always harmonious, admittedly. And of course, the dog has to bark at that moment.
I love a dog. Honestly, I'm very happy to see the dog. It barked during a very important point, which I was really enjoying you making it. This decade, we're going to be making the business case for talking to people who don't look like me. I get enough marketing targeted at me. I could do with a bit less, frankly. So yeah, here's to that. We'll be keeping a close eye on that. And to my final question, for anyone still watching, we have a fantastic bunch of tips for people wanting to enter our awards this year. As the chair, what will you be looking for? What's going to make work stand out this year?
So good standout work, clear insight, like make it really clear. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the thing you're addressing? There's nothing more frustrating than seeing aesthetically and beautifully crafted work, but that doesn't have a very clear insight or purpose to it. I think also, great, clear, like no bullshit. Am I allowed to swear? No bullshit.
Swear away. I might swear later on.
No, I don't. There's just, we could be so verbose in marketing. I think, that clarity of why you want to do something, what you're trying to achieve with it, and just no bullshit crap. Like get to what you're trying to do, the craft and the way you approached it and what you achieved out of it. And just I think people kind of can overload the metrics, but the metrics are important, but I want to understand the impact of the work that you've had. What did you change? What did you shift? And that sense of why this is standout. And the standout should be creatively, it should be from a media perspective, it should be the thing that you would hope to carry on in the work that you do. I think, that's for me is a great sign of work, is when people are committed to continuing in that way.
Excellent. I can't wait for you to be inundated with all these great entries. And I'm sure we'll have a really great level of entries this year. Hopefully. As you say, it's been a bit of a different year and people may have been inspired to do something a bit above and beyond. And unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. You'll be very busy. I'm sure you could answer questions all day, but we can't do that. So we've been through consumer trends, the new type of creative, how marketers reacted in 2020. And we've had some great tips for any award submissions coming in, which I'm very happy with. So I have to thank you for joining so much. I hope the audience found that very helpful. And if you want a bit more of that, you can check out thedrum.com or thedrummarketingawards.com. Thank you very much and goodbye for now.